coming through when the growth look good on you. Best believe they wanna screw now. I've been trying to climb, devil threw me in the dark. Baby, don't be insecure, you can still go make a mark like blow. Could never let them drain my soul now. Blow. Table turning like doorknobs, wow. Blow. I think I'm about to set sail. I'm a walking, living legend, walking with my chest out. Life keeps dealing me cards, I keep feeling in love.
Yes, people, what is going on? What is going on? It's G, and we are back in the building. And today we'll be looking at none other than Italian Nicolo Barella. Now, guys, obviously, before we dive in, you already know the vibes. You already know what it is. If you guys could please make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are brand new. Now, obviously, today. So kind of a little bit of a look into Nicolo Barella. Now, most of you, if not all of you, you already know, the kind of player that he is. You already know, what type of individual he is. Obviously plays for Inter Milan, plays for he plays for the Italian national team as well, one of the stars of their Euro win. Excellent player, excellent player. Definitely someone who I think a lot of clubs around Europe would certainly want to have, in their team. Now, obviously, the reason why I want to look at it from a Liverpool perspective. So, not only obviously is he a fantastic player, not only is he a player who would come into the team immediately and start, obviously over there on that probably right central midfield position. I think that would be a position that he would definitely take up, and we'll obviously take a look into him, the type of player that he is, and all of that. But one of the main reasons is because, obviously, this transfer window, it's been open, I think, less than a week, or if not about a week now. And of course, Liverpool, first day of the transfer window, we got in Alexis Mac Allister. Absolutely brilliant, in terms of getting someone in ASAP, someone who I'm assuming is going to be starting, obviously, in that first team. No problem. Now, obviously, the window's only just open. So, of course, I'm not really one of those who are super bothered, so to speak, in terms of not getting anybody else in at this current moment in time. For me, that's not really where my issue kind of lies. My issue lies more in the fact that Liverpool are not, again, my personal opinion, Liverpool are not really going out for the players that I feel the team, club, squad really need to be able to get themselves back to a position where they are winning / challenging for titles. Now, obviously, that might be because we're in Europa League now. Maybe we can't get those kind of players. I'm talking about Nicolo Barella, but would he want to come to Liverpool, who are in the Europa League? I know people say it's only just one season, but ultimately, I mean, if it's not Inter Milan, I don't know why you would swap that for, a Europa League team. And if we're being totally honest with how competitive I feel the Premier League is going to be next season, there's no guarantees that Liverpool are going to get themselves back into that position. I do believe that the new coefficient thing is coming into play. So, people tell me, yeah, top 5 gets you, Champions League places and stuff like that. So there is that. And obviously we finished 5th last season. So that would get us into the Champions League next season. But finishing 5th, that's not really what you want to be doing, for your career. Someone like a Barella anyway, someone who's already at the top, of his game, just coming off the back of playing Manchester City in the Champions League final. They've I think they've won a couple of cups as well this season, Inter Milan. So, they're definitely at a good level, and he's obviously been at this level for, quite some time. Now, my only issue, I think, really with this whole transfer window it's just the sheer fact that Liverpool are going for players who we would probably deem to be project players. So Alexis Mac Allister, I wouldn't call a project. He's more your typical, I feel, Liverpool signing. The player who, he's not a top level player, by any stretch of the imagination, but he's one of those players who potentially could get there. Maybe, obviously, this is his next step, so to speak. This is probably the step that he would need, potentially to go to a team hopefully like Liverpool, and then obviously go from there and then turn them into world stars, as a lot of people like to keep reminding me. But in terms of all the other players that Liverpool have been linked to, the Kones, the Kefren Turam, the Gravenberchers, the Gabby Viegas, the Mick van der Veens, Timber, so there's a lot more, but those are, would I say, like the main ones. None of those players are obviously at a top level. Of course not, they're all quite young, but more importantly, they're all project players. Like, they're all project players. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, listen, since let's say since 2016, 2017, obviously Klopp, we know how Liverpool work, we know how Klopp works. He's always got in project kind of non-ready-made players. He's never ever signed a player who I would consider to have been a top-class individual. Van Dijk, Van Dijk will probably be the only one. Van Dijk and I think maybe Fabinho. I think those two, I'd probably say they're the ones I would consider to be like, okay, yeah, they're at especially Fabinho as well. I know people say, oh, Van Dijk because of how he's kind of turned out. But I'll be totally honest with you. Me personally, I didn't think it was at that time as well. You got to remember context of time. At that time, there were a lot of better defenders out there than a Van Dijk, to be honest with you. You still had the Sergio Ramoses and people like that, PKs who were still in there, still coming to the end of their kind of peaks. So, yeah, at that time, he was a good defender, very, very good defender. But it's funny because the reality is Liverpool went for Lovren over a Van Dijk anyway, prior to that. So clearly we thought Lovren would turn out to be the better defender. But that's neither here nor there. Van Dijk's obviously turned out to be one of the best defenders out there. Fabinho was a very good defensive midfielder. He, again, do you know what? I don't think I'd even put Fabinho into that bracket, to be honest with you. I think we got to stop putting people into these kind of brackets because of our agendas and stuff like that. Because ultimately, what you then have is it then doesn't become an exclusive kind of thing. It then becomes, well, if anyone's okay, then we're just going to put them into top class, etc., etc. I feel like, again, Fabinho, I was thinking about it. He had a fantastic season, at Monaco, helped them to win, League, over PSG and stuff like that. Bernardo Silva, Bakayoko, Mbappe, Radamel Falcao, that fantastic team that they had, back then. But they were all still kind of like relatively new. He'd only really done it that season. So one season for me is not enough for me to consider you to be a top class player. Just consider it to be, yeah, you've done all right. You know what I mean? You've done well. Let's see if you can consistently keep there. So I'm going to stick to what I said, which is I don't think Liverpool ever signed a top class player. Thiago would be the only one, and that's exactly what I mean. Now, yes, that's been the mantra and stuff like that and blah, blah, blah. That was when we were still trying to challenge. That's when we hadn't won the Champions League. That's when we hadn't won the Premier League. Now Liverpool in this position where they have won both of those things and are supposed to be a club who are challenging for honours and things like that. We need to get ourselves into a position where we're signing this top-class talent. I'm not asking for the club or Jurgen Klopp to sit there and say, yeah, you know what? We need to sign Barella, we need to sign Tchouameni, we need to sign Bellingham, we need to sign Enzo, you need to sign this guy. No. Of course not. It doesn't really work like that. And I don't think the team even realistically, it would be nice to have these kind of players, of course, because they're way better than the players that we do have, but it's not necessary, so to speak. But what I am asking is that we still supplement the team with top class players, top class players in someone like a Nicolo Barella, and you can get your Kefren Turams or your Kones or whoever it is that Liverpool are going to sign or want to sign. You can still get those players. But why not supplement that with a top class signing, which then allows for those project players to get a bit more time to get into their stride. And also it helps playing with top class individuals. Of course it helps. If Phil Foden plays with all of these top class players, which then turn him into a really, really good player. Whether you think he's top class, well, I don't think he is, but he's a very, very good player. And he looks like he's got a bright future, ahead of him. How do you get that? Playing with top class players. You're not going to get that like a Harvey Elliott or a Curtis Jones, who are not really playing what I deem to be that many top class players. Do you get what I mean? So when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, okay, in the midfield anyway, when I'm looking at that, I'm thinking to myself, everyone keeps talking, I'm looking at other teams like Newcastle, and on one side, you shouldn't be watching what other people are doing, but at the same time, you kind of need to, because you also need to understand, these are the teams that we're competing with. We're going to be competing with Newcastle, Manchester United, Arsenal, Chelsea. Those are the 4 teams I believe that we're going to be, in a race with next season. I don't think we're in a race with Manchester City. I think the only way that happens is if everyone falls off a cliff, like they did in the season that we won the league. I think that's the only way I see Liverpool getting themselves back, to that kind of position. But when you're watching all these other clubs, Arsenal just signed, obviously, Kai Havertz. Whether you think he's good or not, Obviously, Mikel sees something in him. That remains to be seen in terms of how he pans out. But it's the sheer fact that they're then still saying, okay, well, we want a Rice, we want a Caicedo, two players who come straight into that squad, the squad that just finished second in the Premier League, I think 5 points behind Manchester City, and they still improve upon that squad. Whether they get them or not, obviously remains to be seen. So we'll have to wait on that. Manchester City, we know that they're in for Declan Rice. We know that they're in for Vardio. You know that they've just signed Kovacic. So again, they're moving even further, to be honest. Or if they're not moving further, they've maintained the level. And if they maintain the level from last season, don't worry about it, guys. There's not going to be a title race. It will be Manchester City next season, because no other team, in my opinion, is good enough to be able to, topple that kind of team. Then you're looking at Newcastle. Newcastle obviously look like they'll be set to sign Tonali. They're looking at so many different other players. I've heard news that they are looking at the Italian market at, players like Theo Hernandez. Can't remember who the other player is that they were looking at, but I think Theo Hernandez was one of the players that I saw, on the list, besides obviously getting in, a Tonali. They were looking at Barella, but I think the price is obviously a little bit too much for what they were willing to actually pay, and then Chelsea, we know, looking at Caicedo, they've already got in Enzo, they've got in Nkunku, they're getting rid of a lot of players to bring in some more quality players. So again, you're looking at these teams and you're thinking to yourself, whether you believe that these players are good or not or whatever, obviously it's all subjective, and we need to wait and see. Just like with Liverpool, these players, heck, they might shock me and they might come in, boom, straight off the rip. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh my goodness, we got this guy for 35 million, and we can start getting happy at the fact that we spend so little and we can produce, some level of results. But me personally, I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't see that happening, because we're not in a position where it's only us and Manchester City that we need to worry about. The teams like your Arsenals, Newcastle were nowhere to be seen. Manchester United were all over the gaff with the managers and the players that they had and stuff like that, back then. And then, Arsenal again, Chelsea, they were a little bit all over the gap. Like, these teams were in that kind of situation. Now these teams are not in that situation. So it's not just us. I know people sit there and say, oh, Liverpool might be the only team to challenge. I don't see that next season. I don't think Liverpool challenge at all. But how can we even try to challenge if what we're putting out on the pitch, or even as a squad, is a bunch of project players with dotted around with maybe one or two world-class players, potentially, depends on how you see it, one or two world-class players, and declining players, aging players, and even the world-class players that we do have, if you do want to name them, they're all aging. They're all getting to that stage where you're like, ooh, do you know what I mean? Like, we've got quite a few of them. So, it's like a catch-22. I've got no problem with trying to get in these players. I really, really don't. I think these players are very, very good. I feel that these players could be very, very good in the future. And I think in a couple of years' time, if they develop really well, the Kones, the Kefren Turams, the Gabby Villegas, the Gravenberchers, if they were able to develop well, now you've got fantastic players. But what's wrong with them saying, you know what, for the time being, let's go out and get the top talent. And this is where the battle comes, and this is where people will obviously say, oh, but FSG this, FSG that. 100%, FSG really do need to start releasing some funds. It's getting ridiculous now, and we're getting to a stage where we're not going to be able to compete with all these other teams. But guess what? I also need Jurgen Klopp to actually stop enabling this kind of behavior from FSG, because you're also going to be held accountable for all the actions, because ultimately you're the guy, you're the manager, you're the guy in the dugout who then I'm going to be looking at. I can't look at FSG anymore. If you're not putting pressure upon, the ownership in any such way, I'm not talking about coming out in the media and, blasting off like an Antonio Conte would do. You don't need that. You've got enough power at this football club where you can go and speak to the owners and say, I need this player, because we're not going to be able to compete if we don't have this player. Instead of saying, nah, it's fine, don't worry about it, I can do something with these guys. Now, he might be able to do something with these guys, but I don't see that happening for about 2-3 seasons. Potentially his last season in terms of his contract, where I probably see, if they develop well, these players will, potentially start to look, really, really good. But by then, where would we be? Where I don't see Liverpool winning the Premier League, and that's where I thought, as a football club, that's where I thought we were at. I didn't think we were still at the stage where you're telling me we need to completely rebuild. To me, that sounds kind of pathetic. That generally sounds pathetic. A rebuild is one of those things where obviously every club has them. Manchester City have had a rebuild, before Chelsea have had a rebuild, before Manchester United have had rebuild. Like teams have had rebuilds, but they don't fall off a cliff the same way that Liverpool do. Chelsea actually might be the rule to exception, to be honest. But guess what? Chelsea went the following season to then win the Premier League. Can we all sit here and say confidently with our chest that Liverpool are going to do that? I don't think so. I really, really don't think so. I don't think anyone's that confident. And to be honest, I don't think anyone's that delusional in thinking that that's a possibility. Not with Manchester City, being here. So again, context of time, and this is what people don't like to be reminded of, is the context of everything. Heck, when I'm looking at Jurgen Klopp and people are blaming the FSG and stuff like that, again, I don't want to make this an FSG video, but when people are blaming FSG and stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, blame them because they're not giving Klopp enough money. But when we're out there on the pitch, I'm not looking at FSG. Liverpool finished a point behind Manchester City twice. Is that got anything to do with FSG? No. Of course it doesn't. That wouldn't even make logical sense because it was a point. It wasn't 25 or 27 or 30 points off. It was a point. I would logically think that would be the coach. I wouldn't sit here and think, oh, you know what? They just given him an extra 100 million. We could have done this, that, and the third. No, the coach was clearly happy with the budget, and he was clearly able to use that budget to get them to that position. So if he was able to use that budget, why would he see a problem with that? Hence the reason why I go back to need to stop enabling this kind of behavior. And that's why today I wanted to look at someone like, a Barella, because I just think that he'd be a perfect fit, for this Liverpool team. He's a dynamic midfielder, but he can do box to box. He can sit deep if you needed him to sit deep, in that position. But for me, he's more dynamic, box to box. He's someone who can break up play really, really well. Looking at his stats here, you can see, the type of person he's a progressive, really, really progressive individual. He can get goals, he can get assists. You can see progressive passes, received 4.97, just under 5 a game. You can see progressive carries, 2.8 per game, progressive passes per game, 6.62. Shot creating actions, 3.65. All the other successful take-ons, touches, passes, even passes attempted, it's pretty decent. And pass completion being at 81%, obviously just low in terms of all the other midfielders, but still, still a brilliant kind of record. And then you can see from this season, and take this banner off, you can see, from his record this season, 52 games, 9 goals, 10 assists. That's exactly what Liverpool need in the midfield. Like, we are crying. People keep saying, oh, McAllister. McAllister's not someone who I look at and is going to get you goals. I don't look at McAllister and think this guy is going to be the guy who gets me to. He may be able to do it. He might be able to do it. I'm not going to go all the way and say it's an absolute thing because I don't feel like anything is absolute. He might be able to come in and get you a couple of goals here and there, but he isn't someone I would call a goal-scoring midfielder. But Barella actually is, on top of being able to do all of the other things in midfield. Look at all the other midfielders that we're looking at, guys. Like, none of the midfielders we're looking at, bar maybe Gabby Veiga, are goal scorers. None of them. Gravenberch is not a goal scorer. Kone, hell no. Kefren Turam, hell no. None of these guys are going to get you in terms of they're not the ones that you're going to be looking at in that midfield where I'm saying this guy's going to get me goals. Like, I'm confident that this guy, with his abilities, if we get him in the right positions, he's going to get me goals. None of them are. They're all players, like to keep the ball. They can move the ball pretty well, strong on the ball kind of thing. They can dribble, get the team moving forward. Some of them are pretty decent at breaking up play. Their movement and all of that sounds absolutely fantastic. But we're talking about a Liverpool midfield, which has been absolute threadbare when it comes to scoring goals. Barella offers you that. So why not go out there and get someone like a Nicolo Barella to play in that right central midfield position, to be able to come into that position where we're talking about a absolute massive upgrade, an absolute massive upgrade on Jordan Henderson, who's currently playing, in that spot. For me, it's an absolute, no-brainer. If we're looking at his heat map here as well, you can see those are the positions he likes to take up. He's dotted around on all the other positions, but right central midfield, that in Liverpool's system is tailor-made for someone like him. This is why I feel Liverpool need to be going all out to go and sign this kind of player. Looking at the systems, obviously playing again, right central midfield kind of thing. Obviously, they play with a 3-5-2 with obviously DeMarco and Dumfries obviously flying up the wing. So it could be seen as a 5-3-2 or 3-5-2, whichever way you kind of want to look at it, depending on I guess, who they're playing against. But Barella, when he's in, those kind of positions in that right, central midfield position, this is what we kind of see from him. Now tell me we haven't seen Henderson in this position, God knows how many times, and how many times that pass is just absolutely just annoying, like stupidly annoying in this kind of area. And guys, we know the hooferson, as some people, like to call it. Even when he's in these kind of positions, you can see making those runs, and you're confident. I'm generally confident that he can get himself into these kind of areas, or be the one who's playing the pass into these kind of areas for the runners. So for the McAllisters, at the moment, I don't feel that there's anyone that we're looking at that's really going to be giving McAllister these kind of passes. Do you get what I mean? I mean, then we're praying yet again that it's a Trent can do his thing, and Trent this and Trent that. No. This is where I feel Liverpool are always doing things just completely backwards. If we look at just quickly at, the type of midfielder he is, Barella is a right-sided midfielder within Inter's tactics. They use 3-5-2 formation, which was used by both Conte and Inzaghi. Barella will occupy the right side of the midfield three. This can be supported by looking at Barella's heat map, which is shown below. Obviously, we just saw it, with the majority of his positioning being the wide right channel. Again, that Henderson position, that is tailor-made for him. The role Barella takes up is what the Italians refer to as a mezzala. In Italian, this term obviously means half wing, and is used to refer to midfielders who occupy those wide central areas. For those who play Football Manager, you already don't know, what that is. Just moving on into the type of play in terms of his defensive kind of side of the game. We focused on Barella's attacking contributions to the team, and although he does provide very effective attacking play, as we have shown, he is also an underrated defensive player. Barella is very good at breaking up play and distributing the position in their opposition in their attacking play. That's what when I'm thinking of someone like a Barella, that's exactly what I think about. That's exactly why I believe to myself, this is the type of player that we should be going for. If people want to sit here and say it's too much to sign a Declan Rice because they don't feel that he's at that level, it's too much to sign a Moises Caicedo because they don't believe he's at that level. You know what? I'll give you that. I'll totally give you that. But Barella is. I don't care who. Unless you've been under a rock for the last three since he moved from, I think it was Cagliari, since he moved from there to Inter Milan, and you've been living under a rock and haven't seen one Serie A game, then I think most and majority of people would say this is a top-class midfielder. This is the type of midfielder who can come into the Premier League, and I don't think we'll have too many issues in terms of the intensity of the Premier League, the pace, the power, all of that stuff. I think he would be able to jump straight into a Liverpool team. And again, obviously every player needs to get acclimatized to a team's tactics. So as we saw with Jack Grealish last season, the 2 seasons ago under Pep Guardiola, still needed time to kind of adjust. Even though he's been playing in the Premier League, he needed time to adjust to the type of tactics and the type of role that Pep Guardiola needed from him. Barella, I feel, isn't going to need that same level of time. Again, I'm putting quite a lot on someone like a Barella, but I'd rather put my stocks in something that's more guaranteed. Nothing in life is guaranteed, of course, but I'd rather put my stocks there than say, yeah, Kone. I've seen a lot of people speaking in, Kone, and Kefren Turem, under 21 football. They're amazing. Just what Liverpool need. So what have we been seeing from Barella? What have we actually been seeing from Barella then? Like, Jesus Christ, because then I'm like, right, that means Barella must be one of, he probably is, one of the best midfielders in the world. If we're getting excited about some under 21 football, which I've seen quite a lot on the timeline, because that's all I'm seeing. Oh my goodness, he does this, that. Guys, man, we need, forget all of those kind of things. Again, we're not in control of that. We're just fans. We just got to sit here, and it's just one of those kind of things. There's nothing realistically that we can actually do. But for me, I'm looking at Jurgen Klopp, I'm looking at FSG, and I say, guys, pull your finger out your arses. FSG, stop being flipping tightwads. Stop sitting there on your arses and trying to find these little deals and penny pinching 35 million. And we don't want to go over the 35 million just in case we, dip into our savings and shit like that. Forget all of that, because soon you're going to have a team that's going to be so far off ever being able to challenge that it's just going to become stupid. Fans are going to turn, I would like to think fans have already turned on them, but by the looks of it doesn't really seem so, because people are like, well, don't worry, Jurgen Klopp can just do this. Jurgen Klopp's the one bloody enabling it. He is the guy that's enabling this kind of behavior, but yet we all sit here and it's like, oh no, it's fine. because Klopp will just turn these guys into world-class players. There's no guarantee you'll be able to do that. The same perimeters that he was working under when he joined and turned those said guys into world-class players is not the same perimeters he's working within now. Time has moved on and time is different. Like I said, there was no Newcastle who was out there, causing a fuss. There was no Arsenal out there causing a fuss. But you get what I'm trying to say? If Chelsea get their act together under Pochettino, which I envisage they'll be able to do if they obviously sort out their signings. Again, we don't know until the end of the window. But if they're able to sort all of that out, they're going to be a problem. Manchester United, heck, if they get new owners, they will be a problem because of the type of players that they're looking to sign. So then what happens? We can't keep sitting here and saying, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. And I'm talking more to the club than I am to the fans. The fans are going to be the fans. Fans, listen, I respect it. You're loyal. Some of you just, whatever Jurgen Klopp says, you straight like that. You don't even think for yourself. It's just, as long as Jurgen Klopp says it, then we're good to go, blah, 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 blah. And I respect it. At the end of the day, you love the football club. I know everybody does. So it is what it is in that kind of regards. This is more to speak to the Liverpool ownership. This is more to speak to Jurgen Klopp. Forget all of these other players. I don't care if you did sign a Kefren Turam or a Kone. I couldn't give, they're not, they're okay. They are okay players. I'm not going to, dismiss them at all because they are decent players, but they're not winning you a title. They're not the type of players that I'm looking at and at first thought anyway, we don't ever actually know, but at first thought, I'm not sitting there thinking, yeah, that's it. Those are the players we know. I'm sitting there thinking Nicolo Barella. I'm looking at those kind of, heck, I am looking at Declan Rice. I am looking at Moises Caicedo, the Ugates of this world. I am looking at those type of players because those type of players move the needle, and those type of players are the type of quality that every club should and would want to have in their team, alongside a Kefren Turam. Imagine that. Imagine being able to say, get rid of all the bloody deadwood at the club and be able to say, I could potentially call upon a Thiago, a Barella, a Kefren Turam, a McAllister, a Curtis Jones, a Fabinho, Jordan Henderson and all these other guys. But imagine being able to call upon that kind of pool of players. Then we can sit and have the conversation where, Liverpool don't need to have that many midfielders. Of course you don't. Barella's someone who plays a lot. He's quite durable. Did you get what I'm trying to say? A Kefren Turam, relatively durable. Well, he is durable. A Kone, durable. McAllister, durable. Then you don't worry about your even Fabinho is relatively durable, just been off form. Then you're not worried about the Thiagos. You can only play your 20 games here, 20 games there. This I'm saying, it all adds up, man. It all adds up. And for me, that's why I kind of wanted to do this video, and that's why I kind of wanted to just look at, why I feel Liverpool should be going all out to try and sign, Nicolo Barella. I know everyone's going to sit here. Of course, it comes down to your budget, and if we or the owners don't want to be giving us a bigger budget, to be able to spend more money, then of course there's nothing we can realistically do. But again, I go back to it. It's not just the owners. Klopp needs to stop enabling this behavior. He needs to be telling the owners that this is the type of player that will help us a lot quicker to get back to the top than signing, all of these dibby-dabby players that, that we're potentially looking at. But, it is what it is, and we'll obviously have to wait and see. Let me know what you guys obviously think in the comment section in regards to that. What do you think? I mean, it's probably a stupid question, but would you guys like to sign, Nicolo Barella? Do you think it makes sense just going out signing all these dibby-dabby players? I keep calling them dibby-dabby. That's disrespectful. Signing these type of project players, should I say, and just hoping that Jurgen Klopp can do, lightning strikes twice, and he's able to just do the same thing, run it back, blah, 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 and all these kind of, different things. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys. I'm tired. I'm out here, man.